Ukraine says it's destroyed about 1/3 of Russia's warships, and it's doing this without a full-fledged navy. How are cheap unmanned sea drones taking down $200 million warships? And how has this asymmetrical advantage helped them in the Black Sea? I'm Sam Fellman. I'm a US Navy veteran and a defense editor with Business Insider. Let's look at the balance of power between Russia's Navy and Ukrainian forces. The Black Sea is a critical fight between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is using its naval power to threaten to blockade the exports that are central to Ukraine's economy. It's also using its warships to strike targets throughout Ukraine. Ukraine is working to neutralize that overwhelming advantage. On the ground, Russia has regained the momentum, given Ukraine's shortages of artillery and air defense missiles. But in the waters of the Black Sea, the opposite is true. There, Ukraine has gained the momentum. Russia borders the Black Sea. Its Black Sea ports account for 30% of its seaborne trade, including oil. Ukraine is one of the world's largest grain exporters. Its trade accounts for $28 billion annually, and before the war, 98% of that trade moved via its Black Sea ports. 3 NATO countries border the Black Sea, and were Russian attacks to affect those countries' shipping or territorial waters, it would likely trigger an international crisis. The Black Sea Fleet is composed of about 40 ships and 7 submarines. Let's talk about a couple classes that are used against Ukraine. The Admiral Grigorovich frigates are a newer ship class. There's Kilo-class submarines, and those can fire Kalibrs. There's new missile corvettes. These corvettes are about 200 feet long, half the length of a frigate. And then there's landing ships that are useful for moving troops and material. The Ropucha-Class, for example, can move up to 10 T-72 tanks and 340 troops. The Black Sea Fleet also has air defenses, aircraft, and naval infantry. Russia uses seals and dolphins for harbor defense. These animals are useful at spotting an intruder like an enemy diver. They're also useful for assisting Russian divers on a mission, but they're not effective against an incoming drone boat like Ukraine is using. Russia keeps its dolphin training program under wraps, and we know about its presence because of satellite images showing pens of dolphins near Russian naval bases in the Black Sea. The US Navy also has a marine mammal program of seals and dolphins that it uses for harbor defense, but it rarely provides outside access to the animals in their facilities. Ukraine has principally used 2 weapons to fight back. The first are missiles. It used its Neptune missiles to strike and sink the Black Sea Fleet's flagship, the cruiser Moskva. That effectively forced Russian ships to abandon the northern Black Sea. It has continued to use long-range missiles to strike ships in Crimea. It's also developed what are essentially the first modern exploding naval drones. They are low-profile, fast boats loaded with explosives. They can reach further than Ukraine's missiles. They explode at a vessel's waterline and trigger flooding. They're remote controlled by pilots staring at the drone's video feed. There's only about 2 feet visible above. That's low enough it's hard to spot on a warship's radar. They can maneuver into targets at speeds of up to 55 miles per hour, and they pack an enormous punch. The newest one carries 1,900 pounds of explosive, or almost double the likely amount of explosive used in the USS Cole bombing in 2000 that killed 17 and almost sank the destroyer. A ship's crew has to be on lookout for this threat to be able to stop it in time. Okay, so here's somebody who has started a cell phone video, a crew member, and look, they've got a searchlight in the water scanning for where they think the drones are. Now you're seeing the crew firing machine guns, but they're trying to put as much fire in the water as possible. This is a night attack. These are black vessels low in the water. There's no light on these vessels, and so that searchlight's going to be important to try to spot it. Here we're seeing just a lot of wild mounted and handheld machine gun fire, and there we're seeing what appears to be one of the first hull impacts of a blast. We're definitely seeing some kind of onboard fire. That's a really bad sign. One of the dangers here is that now the ship has some kind of blast, is likely taking on water, and meanwhile they recognize there's more bomb boats that are coming in. This is a terrifying situation for them. And there we've got another blast. To have any hope of saving the ship, they're going to need crew that are going to those spaces and closing off any hatches to try to seal the spaces from others. If the flooding is going to go through more of the ship, all the weight of that water is going to bring the ship down, and it's going to roll over or it's going to sink. Here we've got like the view from the camera of a drone moving extremely quickly in on this missile corvette, and then it's hitting the stern. That's likely this blast we're now seeing. So it's getting right up against the stern. These are probably crew-served machine guns. And once again, they've proven ineffective. We're having another stern blast on this missile corvette. We're already seeing the damage from a prior strike. So once the hull's integrity has been broken, then a secondary blast at the same spot is going to be devastating. There's crews that are going to be responding to that area to try to minimize the flooding. And so another attack might kill those responders. It may also just widen the gap that's already been created. This is going to lead to a total loss of the vessel unless it's stopped. Ukraine has continued to update its sea drones. Its latest version can carry more explosives, it has a longer range up to about 600 miles, and it can ride in rougher seas. High seas complicate the effort to spot bomb boats. Normally, a radar technician dials back the sensitivity so as not to get radar returns from waves. But in a high sea state, where the waves are, say, 3 feet high, they're going to have to look through the radar noise created by those waves to spot a 2-foot tall bomb boat. We can only guess what the battle for the Black Sea has cost Russia financially, but it's probably measured in billions of dollars. For example, the repair needed for just one damaged Kilo-class submarine is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. The cost to Ukraine is comparatively small. Ukraine doesn't have a navy. Ukraine crowdfunds for its sea drones, and each one is estimated to cost about $200,000. That's much cheaper than a guided missile. The Harpoon missiles that the US has provided to Ukraine, for example, cost about $1.4 million a piece. One Patriot intercept missile costs about $4 million. Russia's moved slowly to adopt defensive measures. It's laid out physical barriers like floating booms and sunken barges to try to narrow its harbor mouth, all to try to prevent the drones from reaching moored ships. Helicopters and patrol aircraft scan the seas around the port, and ships man crew-served machine guns. And there is evidence of electronic jamming to try to confuse the drone's navigation or to disrupt its steering control. But Ukraine will likely adapt. It's a huge surprise that Ukraine is now forcing Russia to relocate its vessels out of Crimea in order to keep them from getting damaged by missiles and drones. Russia's done considerable damage with its Black Sea fleet. Its ships have fired long-range Kalibr missiles against targets throughout Ukraine. The Kalibr itself has about 1,000 pounds of explosives, but it can also carry nuclear payloads. There's also evidence that Russia has fired its ship-launched Tsirkon hypersonic missile against Ukraine. That missile moves its speeds higher than 5 times the speed of sound, making it more difficult to intercept than other missiles. Don't count the Black Sea Fleet out. There's still significant ships that are able to fire a lot of missiles and cause a lot of damage inside Ukraine, but they're having to do it from farther away now, and Ukraine has them running scared. What we're seeing in Ukraine isn't a passing fad. This is a new emerging threat that is likely to only become more pervasive and deadly. And the reason is just the dangerously simple logic at play here. If it only takes a couple $1 million to build swarms of drone boats that can knock out a $2 billion destroyer, then many countries are going to build those fleets. And it's not just countries like Ukraine without navies. This is a threat that is only going to become larger as more countries get this technology, and it's going to be really considerable for operations near shore. It may force some of the most advanced navies, including the United States, to either develop technologies that can counter it or to operate further from shore to give itself more space from these attacks. Ukraine has received considerable support. The UK and France have provided their long-range Storm Shadow missiles, and those have struck ships. Those struck the fleet headquarters and shipyards. Western partners also routinely share intelligence with Ukraine, and it's almost certain that that is playing a role in the targeting of Russian ships. There's also one report by the Washington Post that Ukraine's sea drones were developed jointly with the CIA and other Western intelligence agencies. Which country has the balance of power? It's really important to remember that the Black Sea Fleet is powerful, and it is powerful now, and it has, even in its new home ports that it's being pushed to, it has the long-range strike weapons to continue to barrage Ukraine. It's hardly knocked out of the fight, but it is sidelined. It's a powerful asset whose brunt has been dulled. Russia's starting to take measures that are going to complicate Ukraine's attacks on its Black Sea Fleet. But will those stop the attacks? That's unlikely. Ukraine is evolving and is really at the cutting edge of naval strategy, spearheading a technology that may in time become as much of a threat to surface ships as guided missiles. The balance of power lies with Ukraine. Ukraine has seized the momentum, and it's sidelined the Black Sea Fleet. That's a victory in and of itself.